When you work in Excel, and especially if you are really new to Excel, did you know that there was more than one way to save a workbook? Well, we're going to look at some of those ways today. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at saving your Excel workbooks. I have just opened a new blank workbook in Excel. You can sort of see that because, well, there's nothing in the worksheet, but as I come up to the green title bar and go to the right, I can see that it says Book 1 in Excel, but Book 1 really tells us that this has not been saved and there's no name attached. It's just Book 1 is the default name for a file. And so then I need to make a quick decision. Do I want to type and perhaps save later on and then type some more and save? Or do I want to just start at the beginning, type everything in, do all of my data entry, and save at the very end, keeping in mind that if someone knocks a power cord loose, we could lose everything. Or we can start from the beginning by naming this file. And in fact, that's what we are going to do today. The most obvious way, probably, to save this file is to come up to the tabs that are just above the ribbon. And when I go to the tabs above the ribbon, the very first choice here is File. So I can click on File, and it brings me to what Microsoft calls the backstage view. So if you keep in mind that the worksheet and all of the information that you're putting in it is sort of like the singers and dancers and musicians that are out front performing, then back here you have the people with the sound and the lights and maybe even moving the furniture around, who are simply the people who are there and they are working, but their work is kind of hidden from the audience. Now, from here in our backstage view, on the left-hand side, we can see that we have options here for going back to home, creating a new document, opening one that exists. But as we come down a little bit farther, we can see that we have the choice of Save or Save As. Now, it used to be a hard and fast rule that if you wanted to save a document for the very first time, you used Save As. If you want to give the document a new name or location, you use Save As. Now, that has changed a little bit as we've got newer versions of Excel, but let me show you what Save As gives us. So we'll click on Save As, and now at the top here, just to the right of that green bar, it even says we're in Save As, and as we come down, it gives us the locations on the computer where we may want to save this workbook. And I'm just going to come down to the very bottom to Browse and click on that. And then I have in my File Explorer on the left-hand side a list of the different locations where I may want to save this workbook. And I think I'll just save it on the desktop today. So I'll click on Desktop. And then this gives me a list on the right of everything that I have on the desktop of my computer. And coming down then, I can see that the file name default is Book 1. Now, if I were to go ahead and save it as Book 1, then the next new workbook that opens would try to be Book 2, and then the next one would be Book 3, etc. But we need to give this a name that makes sense for us so we can come back and find it if we need to. Now, we're just going to call it Save Example. And then below that, we have Save As Type. Especially if you're new to Excel, you're going to just take this default of Excel Workbook. But as I go to the right and click on that drop down, I can see that if I understand macros and write those, I could save this as a workbook that has macros, and then I could even save it as I come down as a web page or as a template, or sometimes, I must confess, I save it as a text file, depending on what I want to do, or here's some more text options. This CSV is comma separated values, which is also a kind of text file. So I have all sorts of choices that, depending on what you need to do, you can save this as something other than just the regular Excel file. But we're going to come right back up to Excel Workbook, and we can say it's Save Example, it's an Excel Workbook, and then down at the bottom right, we can click on Save. And now, as I go up to the green title bar, instead of saying Book 1, this says Save Example in Excel. I've opened another blank example, and as we go to the title bar here and look at the name of this file, we can see that it is Book 2, because I thought we ought to look to see what happens if we forget about Save As, or we get in a hurry and we go to File, but this time we go to Save instead, because this goes against older rules, but boy is it a lifesaver that just kind of covers you if you accidentally select Save instead. So watch what happens. I click on Save, and yet look at the upper left here where it says Save As. And so when I have a blank new workbook that has never been saved before, and it has one of those default Excel names of Book 1 or Book 2, whether I click Save or Save As, I'm going to get the same Save As option. I've decided to add to our Save Example, and we're just going to very quickly do this because we are in a place where, and maybe you are too, or at least you can remember, either looking at the school calendar or maybe even the local newspaper to figure out what the lunches are going to be for the week. So I'm just going to quickly type Monday, and then I'm going to use the fill handle to come across to Friday. And then school started 8/22, so then another week will be 8/29. And again, I can select those two dates to establish a pattern, find my fill handle in the lower right of the second date, and I get that skinny plus sign, and then I'm just going to click and drag down through the end of December anyway. And we just simply know when we're going to make lunches and when we're going to buy them. And if we make lunches, then actually that means we're going to buy milk. So let's say that we're going to buy milk here, but we really like the pizza that's in the cafeteria on Tuesday, and then whatever it is on Wednesday has spinach with it, and we're not spinach fans, and so then maybe we have a special lunch again on Friday. And so this helps us just keep track of how we are going to be organized as a family. And you know, I'm going to go ahead and select these columns and center those letters, just so it's a little easier to read. But now that I have this worksheet started, this small little spreadsheet, what I want to do is to be able to save. What I don't want to do is go to File, Save As, because I don't need to give it a new name or a new location. I just want to take the existing worksheet, the existing spreadsheet, if there is one, and save what I've added in addition. So one way I can do that is go back to File and Save, and sometimes you'll see just kind of a little blip of saving. Once in a long while, you might see a progress bar of some kind, but I have saved that information. So I can close my document, reopen it, and this will still be there. I'm going to open the Save example from my desktop. And when I do, you can see that it has saved everything that I've done up to this point. So now let's think about the next week. And as we look at the paper or the school calendar, there is not a thing on that list that seems better than a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So we're going to buy milk all week. And now we want to save that information. And while I could go to File and Save, that's 2 clicks, but let's go up to the left part of the title bar where you may have this option of Autosave. It kind of depends on how your computer is set up. And you could certainly turn that on. Autosave will save at a specific amount of time, say every 10 minutes, for example. And so you're always assured that you're not losing something, even if you're working for a long time without consciously saving. But to the right of this, I have a little floppy disk that says Save. So I can click on that button. And again, you could kind of see a flash over here at the right, which tells me that my new addition to this spreadsheet has now been saved. Besides using our quick access toolbar to save, here is something else that's a really nice shortcut. I have opened up a blank new workbook, and you can tell that because I have Book 1 Excel. And if I decide that I want to save a brand new workbook, whether it has information on it or not, I actually can go to my quick access toolbar and the Save button and leave File Save As or File Save completely alone. But just click on the Save button here and it will say, okay, well, do you want to save this file? Give it a name, and we'll just call it Example 2. And then it says, well, choose a location. And it's always going to default to Documents, but we'll go to More Locations. And then it kind of takes me to this Save As look, but I just browse. And then I can go to the desktop again. And I still have, boy, this is familiar, isn't it? The ability to change the file name or to save the type, or if I decide I don't want it on the desktop or the default documents, I could put it any place else over here on the left, but let's click on Save. And again, we've saved Example 2, but this time we used the Quick Access toolbar. I'm going to add one more week's worth of lunches, and whether or not we want to buy the lunch or the milk. And let's say that we want lunch this day and lunch this day and lunch this day, but we still want milk the next 2 days. And instead of consciously going to File Save or Save As, or going to the Quick Access toolbar and going to this Save button here, we just kind of get distracted, and so we go clear over to the top right where we have a Close button. This could be a really bad mistake, but let's see if Excel is smart enough to pick up on what we're doing. So we're going to click the X to close, and it says, well, wait a minute. Do you want to save your changes? Well, yes, we do. And we do have the option here to save or not save, or cancel just gets rid of this little window and takes us back to our spreadsheet. But we're going to say save, and not only do we save, but Excel closes. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org youtube.com/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, Learning Express Library, and Udemy Business. We also premiere 2 new videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel. From there, be sure to look for our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist, which contains all of our tech videos.